Go.
Going on?
You piece of shit. You should have just kept your mouth
Begin.
shut. Right, sorry. We need to. Fuck, Tyler. Introduce the video.
Welcome to a long overdue video.
But one that was thought of only quite recently, though. That's the different. That's the weird thing about it. This is one that could have happened a long time ago. I would say. Obviously, a lot of this has been covered. In fact, wasn't the enemies one that we did? That was post season 4, right? Because that's like when they had a lot of enemies.
No, I don't think we.
I think it was. I'm sure it was season 4. Yeah, I know because I remember putting like the Rockpox breeder in there and things like that, right? And the spreader.
All right, actually, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
And so obviously that covered literally everything here except the Heartstone. But that's the difference between that and this is that we get to essentially make this, if it ends up being that way, basically the same length as that because it's focusing on the bosses as bosses, or more specifically as boss fights. Which is kind of a weird concept when I realise I don't think there's actually an S tier. I don't. When I look at them, I've been thinking about this for a while. Yeah, because I don't think boss fights are inherently Deep Rock specialty. Deep Rock specialty is horde shooter, which means that it's actually the game becomes a bit weird when it's like focusing on one enemy is taking up the same amount of time, if not more time, than a swarm. Although a lot of them do work very well, such as the Dreadnought. But yes, and also it's a tier list, and we love doing tier lists. This is our bread and butter, really, isn't it?
This is what we started on.
The
first video was a tier list.
It is.
And we're back to form for now. And we have Tom, but that's not here or there.
Your number one voted favourite Barrel Vision member, Tom, is here.
Co-host. No, wait, that's not how that's called.
What's like beyond that? Guest host? Or just guest?
Intruder. Maybe?
Intruder?
That's the Intruder is a name of a motorcycle.
Shut the fuck up.
Okay, so I'll assume you accept that one then. Speaking of motorcycles,
it's a cruiser.
What do you mean? Speaking of motorcycles,
Dreadnoughts.
Alright, so yeah, Tom is here. The thing is, Tom is actually equipped for this, but it just depends on whether or not he's going to be able to give himself to it. That's what this will depend on. But we'll see.
I'm feeling up to it today.
Alright, that's
normally
good.
Quite run down.
Let's test that with the default Dreadnought.
I think that's the best starting place possible, obviously. I feel like, so obviously we start by putting anything in B. It's just like a holding station. I don't know. I might be tempted to pretty swiftly put him up here. I don't know, because the Dreadnought is. This is the thing about the Dreadnought. It's not the Glyphid Grunt, right? It's not as perfectly encapsulating of the idea, and that's kind of the problem with all the Dreadnoughts is that they are unofficially just teasers. They never feel like truly complete. There's this aspect of them. They're just like, we know they're not the best they can be. Just like spiritually at least, because we know that they're not done. It's kind of a weird like spiritual aspect to them, where it doesn't convey like the Glyphid boss notion, like as well as the Glyphid Grunt conveys the Glyphid Grunt notion. You know what I mean? That's why the Grunt was in S tier.
Okay. I think it's B. It's so average.
I think there is like a key part of. He's the first boss, right? Like that's. Like in the game.
In the starting form, normal standard Dreadnought, can we look back to how fucking shit that was?
Yeah, I was going to bring up.
It was terrible.
Yeah, I was going to.
Default Dreadnought now is so like infinitely better than old Dreadnought.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was going to bring up pre-update 33 or 32, where elimination was entirely sustained by this idiot, and it wasn't good. That's not credit to the Dreadnought. It wasn't
or anything, so you could just kill it like instantly.
Yeah, I mean, okay, that was the best part about it, right? That was the best thing about it.
That was the only good part, is that you could like speed run him. The downside was that he was so fucking just wrong and clunky, and the shooting out of his arse thing with no warning, that really ruined it, because that's just like, you dead now, and it's like, cool, couldn't have done anything about that one.
which while it was only recently fixed, is now fixed, right?
Yeah.
He still pulls a bit of a weird angle. Like he's still got
But you can still see his mouth though. You can still see his mouth when it happens. At least it's not like through his body.
If you're going hammer only on his like ass, you won't just suddenly have a fireball appear and one shot you from like point blank, right? You have a bit of warning. So I don't know. I think B is too low because
I think so too.
Not great. But he is it's so solid. Like
I think the Dreadnought really is really good at not actually feeling too strong, like at random points. You know, sometimes a lot of these bosses, they just enter sort of moments where you're like, this thing's just too much. I feel like the base Dreadnought is like a really good like I don't know what you would call it. I mean, middle ground is what I was thinking of.
Don't
I
be
think
an
it's a better
idiot
word for it.
and stay on top of him. You're fine, really. There's nothing that you really have to worry about, and that's fine. I don't think that's a problem.
It was. I think it actually probably is a B, if only because it is just a permanent force of neutral strong strength, I guess is how I put it. Apparently,
shut up, Mitchell. Like, I know I shouldn't point
it
out.
It's like just having super strength. He's just hits hard, lots of health, can't really stop him. But as long as you keep your distance, you're fine.
Yeah, and he doesn't really pull anything that out of the ordinary. Especially like the worst thing he did was if you weren't the host, he would sometimes teleport, which I think all Dreadnoughts do, but they actually recently patched that as well.
Well, not yet.
So
on Monday there'll be no more teleporting Dreadnoughts.
Yeah. So like I don't know, it's just an all rounder, which is why I think B probably is where it belongs. Not because it's bad or anything. It's such a solid baseline that like anything worse than it is a bad boss fight, and anything better than it is a good boss fight. I think is a fair statement, right?
Yeah. Well, this is I think it's a high B, and I could see myself arguing to move it up depending on where this goes. Though, I'm not gonna right now. I'm not gonna fight for it to go in A.
I think for it to be A, it would have to have some specific characteristics, which it doesn't, and I don't want it to have any specific characteristics. It's nice where it is. It's nice that sometimes the boss fight you get is just kind of basic sometimes, and not always a whole big ordeal.
Yeah.
It's just it's this guy, because you get like 3 in a mission.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want them all to be a whole fucking thing. Sometimes it's just good to have some simple ones.
Yeah, and I think the best way to kind of make that make more sense is to talk about the other two.
Yeah, I said that yeah, but this is like this is the whole point. This is to avoid anyone being like, oh, they're actually separate Dreadnoughts. Yeah, but it's one fight though. This is boss fights. Okay. And this I said there weren't any S tiers, but that doesn't, and that might not be true, but that doesn't mean we're not going to have opinions that people are probably going to take issue with. And I think that's going to start right away, because as far as I know, we think the twins are really well designed, as far as I know. I would consider myself a fan, in fact, of these fellas. Even though I hate them.
The twins. Yeah, I hated the twins when they were added.
I love to hate them.
They were overwhelmingly oppressive. They didn't give you any time to back off. They healed constantly. It was really annoying. All that stuff. But after like a month, they became reasonable, right? As soon as you learn them, what the attacks they have, the way
they're just very punishing.
Yeah,
you have to take a more chilled back approach to them.
Yeah, surprisingly enough, yeah.
Yeah. If you just go all in and like you'll get distracted or whatever, you'll be too focused on shooting and you'll get fucked from behind. You just sort of like chill about, take some shots, make sure you're shooting the right one.
But there can still be a good reason to be aggressive. Like, this is why I think it's the best thing about them is actually the healing mechanic. I think people really underrate how like nuanced it is. The fact that it's something that yeah, they use it against you, but the fact that it's not actually a one-sided thing. You can use that mechanic to give you breathing room, and I think that alone is such a nuanced idea. You use their healing mechanic to save yourself. Like you've got two things to play around with.
You've got to play around with the healing mechanic. You've got to play and the actually got tons of shit. There's just got tons of features that are all interesting. like the healing mechanic, the attacks that are actually really punishing, and then also like the leaving one standing as well.
Yeah, who you kill first is always a big decision, and I think decisions in fights is always like just interesting, and it matters. We don't just fight these guys like fucking berserkers, you know. It forces you to not do that. It forces you to think, and I think that's actually really good.
Yeah. It's like it kind of also with the killing thing. It knows that you're probably going to kill the lacerator first, which is why the arbalist is so much more punishing. Like if it's the only one left. Right.
That's why I try and kill the arbalist first. That's why I try.
Yeah, but it is difficult because the arbalist is kind of difficult to kill.
But it's also more exactly. It's more it's more rewarding as well. It's just It also just
he's always the one that's furthest away.
Yeah. And even though we got guns, that doesn't inherently make him easier to kill, right?
He's always burrowing, and you also got to like keep your distance because if you get too close, then he burrows because he doesn't like being close.
I also think their elusiveness and also lack of elusiveness at the same time is also really interesting because I think they look great. And I think for a while you couldn't tell the difference, which is kind of weird. I mean, in this picture you can't tell the difference, which is dumb. But in game you can. One is very clearly yellow, one is very clearly orange. But the more you strip their and also obviously where they are also tells you a lot as well. But when you strip the armor away, they start to
see where they are.
Yeah, but when you start to strip the armor away, they become more elusive as well, which I actually think is deliberate.
Yeah,
and it's also kind of cool.
Well, then you can actually that's what we always do. We always like make sure to ping the arbalist every time you see him before you shoot.
That's another thing. Anything that makes good use of pinging in like a combat scenario, I also like.
Yeah,
like menaces.
Makes it more team orientated as well. Like more coordinated between everyone. It's but quickly fucking arbalist up there.
Even in solo, I just tag the arbalist to make sure Bosco is focusing on it, so I get more damage over time on it. But also just to make sure I know where it is. I like that kind of aspect of it too.
And then I think it's designed that you're supposed to focus the arbalist, and then you're focusing the arbalist, then the lacerator comes up beneath you and fucking dicks you down.
Yeah, like I don't know. It is.
Well you always got to be on your toes, and it's very punishing. And once you get it, and once you do it properly, it's just fun.
Also, terrain does matter as well, because like the arbalest, if you're in like a tall room, for example, even if you're on the floor, which could be a good arena, if you're in a tall room, the arbalest can be really far away and basically impossible to hit. But if you're in close quarters, it's easier to hit, but it also would just shotgun you, and it's like just very deadly and very dynamic. And also, I don't know what you're about to say, but we've got to consider a rating, and I feel like it's at least an A. Not okay. Maybe at least is a strong word, but definitely an A.
Twin boss fights tend to be quite good because it's quite easy to, right? You give them both a strength and a weakness that matches each other, right? And then it's kind of like the fight is inherently more interesting from then on. And the twins are a very good example of a twin or duo boss fight. I think they're well designed, right? They're probably the better of the three.
Yes.
If we want to move on, that's made even more clear by the that bitch who I've actually forgotten the name of.
The Hive Guard.
Hive Guard. There we are.
Mr. Cool Laugh, because it laughs at you, and we still like that. And we still that was still one of my might actually be my favourite memory of a teaser actually that they've put out, was when I first saw the Hive Guard, and it was literally just an animation of it just roaring, and it just was so effective and powerful. And I don't think it's lost that either. And I think there are a lot of cool things about the Hive Guard conceptually and in gameplay. I think it being a little bit further along in development is cool. The Sentinels are cool, but it is probably the most maligned of the three, and I think that extends to us as well. Not necessarily to an extreme degree, but it is probably my least favorite. I still like it, but that's the thing. I don't know if you like it. That's the difference. I don't know if you actually like it.
It's a process, right? Like it is.
Tom just died.
Yeah.
Hive Guard.
You've got to kill the Sentinels, break those little thingy things, and then hit him enough during the time in the back, and then you've got to kill the Sentinels again, break the thingy things, hit him enough, and then you've got to kill the Sentinels, break the thingy things, and then kill him, right? It's like a lot of steps to kill the Hive Guard.
Yeah,
and those steps have quite a
he
large gap.
He needs to have his weakness out for longer, because you spend more time just going through the steps. I think that's why it makes it so tedious. You go through so much more going through the steps and waiting than you do actually fucking shooting the boss and doing damage.
I would agree, but I think it actually comes down to the fact you have to repeat the process too many times. It's like always...
Yeah, exactly, which would change if he was open for longer.
Well, it would also change if every step took longer. Like, imagine if you did every part of it and that was the whole fight, you know? The Sentinels, there's more Sentinels, they're stronger maybe. That's like 1/3. Then the shield phase is another third, and then just killing it is the final third. That's like the whole fight. Imagine that would be a lot better, I think. You know, but instead you have to repeat this process at least 3 times. You know, and it's just like you're basically fighting a mini boss 3 times in a row, and it's the same entity. Like it doesn't change either. If it changed as well after each time you do the process, like something changes about it as well. It's like. It's got too many steps, but it's not...
That's one attack as well that's so bullshit.
Yeah, it's got too many steps, but it's not dynamic enough because of it, though. It's not interesting despite how many steps there are to it. It's weird. Because you do it too many times. Because you do...
It's like, it summons the Sentinels, which takes fucking ages, right? Like, the amount of times we wait for it to just summon
even that, and that's something that they've been trying to... Like, it has a fail-safe, I guess, because they couldn't actually figure out how to make it consistently spawn them right on top of it every time, so they had to introduce a failsafe where after like a minute it will force them to spawn, but even then it's like that shouldn't be a problem.
A minute standing around waiting, but that's like long term. But even then, like quick wise, it's normally like 10 seconds still. You then have a bunch of Sentinels, which while cool, they only also just attack, right? They just approach you and hit you, and then you know meanwhile the Hive Guard shoots like a single bomb every so often, right, or a single shot. And then eventually you'll kill all the Sentinels. Hopefully one didn't spawn in a distant cave and has been slowly making its way towards you for like another 2 minutes, right? Which, let's be honest, doesn't occur rare enough to not consider.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying because these are kind of technical things, but it is how it goes. It's part of the fight.
Yeah.
Can't really ignore it.
You've got to make the center... I mean, if they just make each... Yeah, I mean, Harry, I think you might be onto something with... If they made it, instead of doing it, repeating it fucking 5 times, just maybe once, and make each stage, like, really interesting.
More significant.
Yeah.
Like those I don't know, make the Sentinels different variants, and then make them, like, their own, basically, mini-boss thing. There's maybe, like, 5 that you actually need to kill, maybe a bunch of other ones that are just there to, like protect them.
I guess, like, 2 or 3 different types of Sentinel would be appropriate, especially if, because I'm a big fan of them using the Sentinels in other contexts, so because you need a justification to, you know, add more enemies to the Hive Guard fight, and the justification would be, well, whatever update that's a part of, there'd be another context for you to fight them in, but you'd get like the standard one, you'd probably get a ranged one as well, maybe like a support oriented one or something, like 3 different, you know, Sentinels. One's like a hacker, or like a healer, and like a ranger, I don't know, that kind of thing would probably work quite well.
And like the shooting the blocks on the Hive Guard is just, that needs to be more interesting.
Well, I mean, maybe focusing on the minions is actually the right way to go with the Hive Guard. You know, you get the standard unit that is the base Dreadnought. You get the team, like the tag team duo, but then you also get like a minion like master, like a summoner. But it doesn't really go for it.
I want to just quickly establish something. It tells you where we're going to put this, that instead of talking about how much good stuff it has, we're constantly trying to fix it. That's all we've been talking about.
Yeah, I wasn't inherently thinking of it being low, but I don't see if we can justify it not being lower. It has to be lower than the original.
Yeah, it is very, very flawed. And they could change a lot of things, but at this point it's kind of too late, right? Because, I mean, if I had to pitch my change, I would make it so once it opens, it's like, you kind of like kill a bunch of the minions or whatever, and then one of those 3 segments appear, kill a bunch of minions, another segment, kill a bunch of minions, another segment, and then once its ass is open, it's just vulnerable, and it's just like panicking, and you just murder it, something like that. But point is what they have right now doesn't work, right? I think we all agree on that. It's just bad.
It works the least. It works. Yeah. I can't abide by just bad. I do not think it, because it doesn't. Think about it, Tyler. We actually.
It's more interesting than the base Dreadnought.
Well, I'm just thinking about the mission type, though. I'm thinking about elimination. The fact that me and Tyler are probably our biggest like crossroad in terms of mission types that we like, at least. I think, as in, and we have to take a big issue that people actually don't like elimination, or a lot of people don't like it. And to me, the Hive Guard is not bringing elimination down in any way. That's what I'm trying to say. It's still like elimination's still a great mission type.
Yeah and no, because the people that don't like elimination, do you want to know whose fault it is?
Mostly the Hive Guard. Mostly.
People hate the Hive Guard, and for, I believe, good reason. It is definitely the most flawed of the three, but that's not saying much. But I also think it is kind of bad. It's annoying. It's a bit of a fucking escort duty in a creature. It's laborious to get through most of the time. It's like the curse site, right? It's just kind of, you stand there waiting most of the time, and I think that's bad, right? So I think you can leave it in C because it makes it look
when the game determines the pace.
Yeah, like especially in a boss fight, right? It's a boss fight. I shouldn't be standing around doing nothing, but that happens so often during the Hive Guard.
And fight. It's so much so the opposite in the Twins fight as well. Like, you cannot stop. You can't stop moving in the Twins fight. You can't.
Yeah, and then when they heal, those are the brief moments of brevity, right? Like that's kind of why it's the opposite. In these ones, you spend more time standing around, and then once its ass opens, it does the most bullshit attack in the entire game.
And even then, Tyler, the Twins, the Twins healing, unless you did it deliberately, that's what the Twins healing actually is more so a punishment for you not like playing it correctly. Even then, it is a moment of rest, but it's not positive either. But it's not.
Like, the Hive Guard can suck a fat one. I would put it in D. But we can probably
one
get worse.
Attack that's actually like anything at all, and it's just bullshit.
Yeah.
It's just if you're close, which you are because you've been trying to fight it, it will do an obscene amount of damage that you can't dodge.
Yeah, that attack is bullshit.
Stages, you're trying to shoot it in the ass, and then all of a sudden a fucking 3 like balls of death have spawned like in front of you, and even if you dodge those balls, if you're still near, you'll die instantly because it also has an AoE of damage, right? It's just fucking bullshit.
So it means that it's like even if you dodge, it's like there's like a fucking mushroom or something that the rock gets caught on, which means that they all just blow up. So literally anyone in an area around it, even if you can dodge the rocks through like fucking skill, which is hard to do,
right?
You're just dead.
It's the only attack it has, and it spams it until it leaves that mode, right? It does it like 3 or 4 times, and it's so fucking bad because it only gets 1 attack per stage, and it's just kind of like, it's fair enough it wouldn't have any more than that in the Sentinel stage, right? It makes sense that it will be a back burner on that, but it should do more in the other two, I think, than the nothing that it's doing. I don't know. Like, it fucking blows.
When it's going to do that attack, maybe not have it as unavoidable, because there needs to be like some sort of like that was kind of like the problem with the old Dreadnought, is that it was just out of nowhere you just get fucking shot.
Yeah, so I really like the idea of that attack being avoidable if you're close enough to it. Right, but you can't really do that. Like, as in, if you go behind the rocks and stand right next to the Hive Guard, I feel like that should be a safe zone. But it's not a safe zone because it still damages you.
It's an AoE
right there.
Yeah.
And it is. I almost tried to start rationalizing it until I gave it a moment's thought, and I realized like I could have said something like, "Oh, but it's on Hazard 5." Like the normal Dreadnought's fireball doesn't kill you even if I'm a direct hit on Hazard 5. And yet this thing that's summoning like about a dozen rocks at once and flinging them in every direction, that one hit you with a direct hit, all just from the AoE. Nah. That's not it.
That's supposed to be like the vulnerable phase. I don't know yet. I genuinely, I can't think of a justification why it shouldn't be in D. Right? I think it's sucks.
I think like, I simply don't dislike the experience of fighting it enough to allow that yet. I simply
but I don't think we're gonna get much worse. Or better rather. But yeah. Alright. That'll do for now. So that's the Dreadnoughts. So that's like, you know.
Well, exactly. The Dreadnoughts are in the order that they should be, at least.
Yeah, we all knew this. This was the same in that one the video we did, Harry.
Did you just look at that or something?
I know we put the twins above the dreadnought and the dreadnought above the hive guard. That's just how we think, and what I think is correct.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Now, an interesting one, I think. It's definitely a boss fight, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that was the question. Like, what's the criteria of boss fight? I guess, like, well, it became pretty simple. It's literally just like, no, because the Tritite deposit has a health bar. Something that has a boss health bar and doesn't like it. That's the criteria.
The Omen modular tower is definitely that.
I mean, I love your name of it. I love your label of it because yeah, Omen is right, and that's what we're going to be calling it. But it's not the Omen modular tower. Omen modular exterminator network, because the acronym actually has the word Omen in it. It's OMEN, Omen Modular Exterminator Network, which is ridiculous. The O might mean something else, okay? It might, but it was like, yeah. Another one that much like Betsy is going to be the case. Just a cool like lore behind it as well, actually, of it being part of like the first like pre-dwarf attempts to conquer Hoxie's, and now it's just like it's just gone haywire. Which is why I actually kind of disagree with the way it's presented. Like, though it should be the same as Betsy, it should be like the parasites instead of the green vents. Personally, although it's too late for that now. But still, yeah.
No, I think it's good. I think it's Betsy got corrupted, but this thing's just it kills anything. Like clearly they didn't think to code it.
Yeah, maybe it's actually more spiteful as well. It's more thematic that it just wasn't designed to, not kill dwarves, because it wouldn't have been because it wouldn't have any reason to be if it preceded Deep Rock hiring dwarves.
Like, why do they build 3 pads that you have to stand on to open vents? But we're not gonna criticize it for lore reasons, all right? We're gonna criticize it for very little. I think the Omen is a very, very good boss fight, within the parameters of it being excruciatingly punishing.
So we can't ignore that, because that is the reason why it is probably very overhated. A lot of people kind of despise this thing, and I understand why, but I also
supposed to hate it.
Well, yeah, you are supposed to hate it. I understand where it comes from, but I can't abide by a lot of people who, think it's bad. Right? That's where they cross. That's where it crosses the line. The difference between us and everyone else is that not everyone else, I'm sure, but us and people who just think it's bad is that we don't think it's bad, even if it is a fucking tough cookie. And I think it really justifies its existence in actually being a machine event. In that, and I'm glad I actually haven't seen this argument before. So I guess I am straw manning, but I could easily see a strong argument being made for why it shouldn't be as hard as it is that it should be, like the other machine events, right? But I also disagree. I think a system like machine events is a perfect opportunity to have events that do differ in difficulty, and that shouldn't be a problem. The Omen has no actual reason to be just as easy as Ebonite, for example. It being an optional event, gives Ghost Ship a good reason to make it as fucking ball-bustingly difficult as it is. So I really appreciate it for that.
I think that there is like a part of the game that it kind of abandons. Like, I feel like Ghost Ship, they tend to make things playable for all levels of players, right? That's why there's a hazard 1, right? That literally is basically peaceful mode, right? But it's still there. Like, Ghost Ship understands that not all players are sweaty little diehard
trolls. Omens are actually, sorry, I wasn't paying 100%, but also omens are like optional, so it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Like, you can just be like, oh, that's too hard, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, the issue is that like, most people wouldn't think about that until they've already started it. First of all, right? They've already made that mistake. And it's kind of then like, have we ever not done something that was optional? Right? I know that we've abandoned them before because we were going to lose otherwise. That's fair. But like, have we ever not done something?
The only thing that we don't do is data deposits. Now, sometimes, even then, depending on the mission type, like if it's just an egg hunt, for example, I'm probably not going to ignore something like that. But you know, yeah, data deposits is the only thing that, and that's not even just because that's not because it's too difficult or anything, which kind of is. But we also just disagree with its existence. So,
yeah. As much as it is optional, Deep Rock is the kind of game where if you don't engage with the optional stuff, it's like stuff, how
no,
how kind of like pathetic is the game gonna start being, right? Like think about it.
Yeah,
if
that's
you only
on the player being fucking brainlet.
I know, yeah, but the issue is, Tom, a fair amount of them are, and that's where I think the Omen is like not the best thing in the world because it is a difficulty spike.
Yeah, but it's the only one. It's the only one that's that hard.
I think the Omen should give the rewards that it does, but it should also not be a machine event. It should be a random event, but it still gives you an overclock. That's what the Omen should be, really.
I don't think it would change much. If people encountered it, they would still fight it.
No, but Tyler, what I'm saying is you wouldn't need to use a blank core. That's the difference. It's on the same. It's technically on the same level as the other machine events in that you still have to put in a core to get the reward. I think the Omen should just force it, basically.
It doesn't change anything.
Or it should give you a blank core, maybe, even. I don't know.
Yeah, but it being more rewarding doesn't change anything. It's the fact that many people go into that event thinking, la-di-da-di-da, I'm going to do this like I can do essentially every other event in the entire game with blase and just activate it and then it go well, right? Especially in the lower hazards.
I'll know that for next time. What's the fun if there's no stakes in the game?
That's fair, but the stakes of the Omen are like unparalleled, like heights. Like it is by far the sharpest, quickest difficulty spike in the game. I'm just saying that's not the best game design. I don't think. At least and if that was on purpose, then maybe it shouldn't be allowed for like lower levels of hazards, right?
Yes.
Like I think they know when something is supposed to be really hard, so they try and keep it away from everyone.
But Tyler, the thing is, you're describing something though that you don't want to change still. I know that you want it to stay as difficult as it is. Don't you?
Yeah, because
the only way that is what you said of locking it to only like has 3+.
Yeah,
and that's it. That's it though. That's the only solution because otherwise, like, it is fucking amazing how difficult it is. It's lovely to have a struggle.
Yeah, but then it's also the opposite. If you pull up your bootstraps and know what you're fucking doing, you can make even the hardest form, which is Sentry, Heavy Burster, and the bottom one is always the bottom one. You can make that.
By Sentry, you meant drones. By the way.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I'm telling people that, not you.
Like you can make that hardest one still your bitch if you have the right characters and you know what you're doing, right? Like it is doable if you know what you're doing. Like platforms or drop pods or Betsy to dodge the bottom bit.
Betsy?
I have been proposing to focus on like taking out the drones first instead of the bottom bit because the bottom bit is so preventable. Like basically, it has so many strategies that you can basically counter every part of it. And if you play it well enough, even the hardest one you can still beat easily, but you have to play it well.
It takes advantage of it takes advantage of at least one or two things that every class can do, as in something that only they can do. And that's a mark of a good fight. And Gunner's shields are amazing as well, just for general use.
Trenches that go under, which I think is the worst one, but still.
Well, it's also got the satchels, which are very effective against it. They have a really nice use against it as well. Well, yeah, but like the idea of placing the satchel down before you even expose the vents is a cool thing that you can do. Yeah. Same with the caretaker.
And it's like you can do all these things, and I think it is really good. But like, if you're one of those poor schmucks that's just joined a game or like just doesn't know any better, and you're trying to fight an Omen, you need to like face it like 20 something times before you start figuring that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the Omen's like in a weird like half and half. It lives a half and half existence where it's like poorly designed for like half the population, and then like an amazing, awesome Uber challenge for the other half. Right? It's like
to be Haslot.
And the two halves are either the people who know it, the people who understand it, the people who don't. And people who don't understand it includes people who haven't seen one before and people who just haven't played against it enough. And people who don't understand it is us, basically.
You know those like kind of games or kind of weapons in games where it's like high difficulty, high reward, right? Where you have to really like master something to make the best use of it. That's what the Omen is, but it's not a weapon. It's just something you encounter in the game. And if you're not a master at it, it's gonna fuck you over hard, quick. And it's like yes, I very much appreciate it. It is cool, and I think it's at least an A still, right? But I am saying its difficulty, while being one of its main strengths, is also a flaw.
Yeah, the Omen. Well, the Omen's objectively a B, but I think our favour for it is what puts it in A. This is our tier list, after all, and that's why it's going in A. But if we were like ranking this really objectively, I think it would have to be a B because I think that's the existence it has. That's the Omen's life.
My objectively is public opinion, or
what?
I think it's just that it can't. You can't put it that low when it's.
But it's not
optional,
that low. I mean, it's
entirely
in A.
optional. Yeah, but I think there's absolutely no justification for lower than A because it is fantastic and it's optional. Like, although it's difficult, when something is that hard, right? There is nothing wrong with something being that hard when it's optional.
And you can always leave halfway. Well, like,
yeah, exactly.
No, you can.
You can quit. You can not do it. You can do whatever you want with it.
You can outlast it too. You don't have to.
Like that was like the main problem that we had with like the whole Rockbox thing. Is like it's that yes, it might be shit or whatever, or you don't like it, but that doesn't matter if it's optional. But it wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what the problem was, and it is optional. So therefore, if you don't like it, don't fight it. Simple as, you know. Like you don't have to. You can get the full experience of the game without doing it.
But that kind of reasoning for it being good only applies to someone who knows what it is. It is it's pretty bad when you just don't know what it is. And it was bad for us for a while anyway.
After the first time.
Yes, but we didn't like. I'm pretty comfortable saying we still didn't like it for a while.
But think back to when you first start playing a game. You don't know fucking anything. Everything is a learning experience. Like everything is you get punished for it.
Yeah, but like, what was one of the last things we actually adapted to and started liking because of that? It was the Omen.
It took a long time
because it was so fucking hard. But that's not a problem. That's not a problem at all. I don't think. Like, if a game doesn't have like stages to it, like that's why it gets so fucking boring in Deep Rock, because there's nothing more for us to get used to and learn and adapt to, because we've gotten fucking used to all of it. We know the game in and out. We know all the enemies. We know how to deal with everything. So it's not a problem anymore. It wouldn't have been so interesting if there wasn't the Omen there as sort of like a final thing, because that was the last thing that we got used to.
Sure, and I do agree. For players like us, and
that's what makes it interesting.
Players,
that's like it would be shit if it was any easier. And it's optional, so it's perfect.
Players, it is a monolith of fuck you for being casual and taking this casually. Which is then either they
it's not though, because the casual player can ignore it.
They don't know that they should though.
Only on the first time.
Only on the first time too.
I feel like ignoring content doesn't feel good. Right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think anyone wants to ignore.
That is for us though. Like a lot of people do seem to be okay with just ignoring aspects of a game. We just like to
but it makes the game
get our money's worth, I guess.
No, but Tom, you're right. But it still makes the game worse for them if they realise it or not. They don't realise they're missing out. If they're okay with ignoring something, they're still missing out, even if they're okay with it. You know. And you shouldn't.
Like that's an inevitable like thing that's going to have to happen. Like that's just inevitable. It has to happen for more experienced players to get any fucking enjoyment out of the game for long periods of time. They have to like the newer players are just going to have to suffer. Otherwise, they ruin the game. Like that's what like that. It's kind of unrelated, but like that's kind of what happened with like Siege. They just kept like ruining it for more experienced players by getting rid of all of the parts that made it difficult, that took time to learn, so that all the experienced players had nothing left to fucking do and nothing interesting. They made it only appealing for people who just loaded up the game, which then just meant that it fucking dies because nobody wants to play it, other than new players who play it, get bored, and then go again. Like the game can't and then with constant learning curves and things that you got to improve at. That's what makes the game fun and engaging. When that runs out, it gets boring, like it has for us, because there's nothing more to grow into anymore. The only reason you can continue playing is because you're autistic.
Huh?
We got nothing left. There's nothing left for me to learn anymore. I can kill the enemies easily. I know everything about them. It's just nothing more.
I mean,
so it's essential that happens.
Because you haven't played in 2 seasons, but still, the new content that's been added in these last 2 seasons isn't inherently harder than any of that stuff. Still,
no, it's not, and that's what I find interesting.
But I don't know. Yeah,
there's no more challenge.
Yeah, the Omen's
so
challenge.
Fuck the new players to a degree.
Yeah,
fuck them.
But
not all about them.
No.
Because also
exactly.
the Omen.
Also,
Tom, please to stop.
I'm sorry, but I hate that you seem to think that that is you would complain if they did what you're asking them to do of making it potentially easier for newer players.
He's not
because
actually
that
asking
would
them to
ruin
do
the
it.
game.
That would just be. That,
it is exactly perfect the way it is.
Are you in love with the Omen?
I think he is.
Yes.
It exposes the differences between people. Like a team of randoms. Well, you and other randoms. That can be a very difficult situation. Like that's when we fail Omen. Still, is when we're playing with people who don't know what it is. Like it still fucks you up, because you can't focus the team effort on what you're doing because the randoms just don't fucking know. And so that is part of the boss fight design that isn't particularly comprehensive. It isn't as good as it can be because so much of what just happened, your rant, was more about the Omen as a component of their game rather than actually as a boss fight itself. And it's a boss fight that is just so much fucking harder when you can't communicate with people. And even then, if you could, they just might not know really what you mean or what you're trying to do anyway. But at the same time, I don't see us actually changing where it is, so we should probably move on.
Move on.
What do you think it's?
What you put it in A, right?
Yeah, we put it in A ages ago.
Yeah. I was just confirming.
I hope. Yeah, I mean, if you've been doing all that ranting was because you thought we put it in, B, I would have been pretty upset.
Well, you thought it was a B, which I thought was bullshit.
We started at B. They all start at B. That's the thing.
No, we said it deserves B, but we think better of it. But we'll ignore that. Who? The next one, which is an odd-looking folk compared to what it's surrounded by, the Corlock.
Whoa!
Which I think this is a mixed bag and a half, isn't it?
This is very much so a mixed. This is very much so a mixed bag, and I don't quite know where to start. First of all, I mean, I kind of want to talk about this, even though I guess we should. I think it's very hard to not talk about these things holistically. Like, I tried to get at the fact that we weren't really just talking about the Omen boss fight, but I think, I think it's fair to talk about everything that surrounds these things. So whether or not the Corlock is actually optional is something that needs to be discussed, because it technically is, but that doesn't mean you're not going to accidentally trigger it, though, That's the difference between the Corlock and, well, there's the difference between Corlock, and Betsy and the rest, basically, and the Prospector even as well. In that they're not in. They are technically optional, but that doesn't mean they will be.
Yeah, I mean, right. The Corlock, at least, if you awake, you can leave, and it's stuck there, right? It's at least a stationary one, right? But the Corlock owns a room, right? Whatever room that is. If you want to be in that room, you will probably have to kill the Corlock. This becomes an issue in important rooms, right?
Yes.
Like a room with an objective in, or something along those lines. I can think of tons of examples, but you get the point, right? Like if this is just a random smallish room in a long Morkite mission, where if you were to completely skip this room, you would still probably be able to complete the mission. Then, oh well. Doesn't really matter. Or if you might need to pick at some areas of the room, but it's kind of well.
Yeah, the Corlock can heavily affect the flow of a mission, whereas a machine event just doesn't. And some of these others are, literally parts of the mission. So, and then the call lock can just sort of show up, And the question is it too difficult for how for how much it can affect a mission? It's probably it's probably a small cut above where it should be, personally.
The issue with the core lock is that its strength is completely out of its own hand, right? Like the core lock in and of itself, if you put it in a blank template room, like the what's like the shooting range room that people use, right? You put it in there, even then, I mean, that's its neutral strength, right? Where it is not in any cover, but also you're not in any cover, so like it equals out. But there are some times where its core is essentially unreachable, and its plants are in the best sites in the entire map, and you cannot get up there because you're like, I don't know, a gunner or something, right? It's like at that point in time, the core lock strength is overwhelming. You cannot beat the core lock, like at all, really. I think the core lock is one of the few bosses that can be essentially unbeatable if it wants to, like straight up. I think that's fair,
really fun
right?
when you can do stuff about it. When you have like a driller or like an engineer or whatever, you can build around it and do a bunch of cool shit with it, and it makes it way more interesting. Yeah. But then sometimes you don't have those characters on your team, and then you're in a real awful position. Yeah. And unlike the Omen, it's a threat that gets in the way and is not really. It is optional technically, but if it's blocking your way and there's stuff in that room that you need,
really have to fight it.
You will have to fight
right?
it.
Yeah, like even if it's just to run through it, and like break the dirt that might be right behind it, right? Like it might be guarding the fucking exit.
But like, once again a question of would you want to ignore it, or are you not man enough?
No, with the core lock, I genuinely like. How many times, like with other bosses, have we been sitting there and we're like, shit, we're out of ammo, we can't kill this thing, right? Like, how many times does that happen with other bosses? Barely any, ever, right? Maybe early on against Dreadnoughts because we fucking sucked and didn't.
Yeah, I mean Dreadnoughts, it should never happen. Dreadnoughts, Dreadnoughts, Caretaker, Omen, and Hearthstone, it should never happen against. Basically, that kind of thing, because you have so much control over the situation. Core lock doesn't. Not only does core lock remove your control, it barely has any control itself.
Yeah, it is like if it gets put in the exact wrong place, which can occur fairly frequently whenever the core lock does appear, like you're stranglehold. Like you can't progress any further. You can't get the nitro of that room, and you can be sitting there legitimately out of everything, unable to get any more. Like I remember when I had to drill around the room that core lock was in, and we had to come back to deal with it because we didn't have the ammo. Right, and we couldn't fight it. It was in too good of a place, and that like we managed because I was a driller to avoid it and deal with the situation. But if I weren't, like we would have had to, I guess, pickaxed, right? Like if we wanted to win, like the core lock fucks with you hard without even realizing, or and this is the opposite side. It can be one of the easiest bosses as well, right? Like if it's in a god awful place and you're the right characters, it is a piece of piss. Right?
Well, like, see, this is the thing that I'm not sure I necessarily disagree with you, but you can't ever. It's never like a 10-second fight though. It's never. It's never actually It's never actually a piss. It's never actually piss taking the easy. It can be very easy, but it's never like. It never goes down without you realizing it. Is what I'm saying. You've got to focus on it, even if it's not hard.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like if like there's kind of, I don't know, like 3 stages of map. If you kind of see what I mean, and like the bulb is at the top, and like someone's already up there basically, and like every time the bulb opens, it guns down with an immense amount of damage, like lead spray gunner. Or like just every time that it opens, it takes all the damage it can, and like all the bulbs are taken out almost instantly because everyone's already there and it's just dealt with, right? Like that stuff can occur and probably does occur as often as it does it have an impenetrable like defense, right? Like it's conquered the perfect place in the map. So it's just, I don't know, like the Corlock is so hard to place, right? Like, because with those like things being said, does that make it good or bad? Its strength being so dependent on map, is that a good or a bad thing?
That to me is something that should be a good thing. In Deep Rock especially, where the terrain is such an important component of the game in terms of how not only how like random and unpredictable it can be, but also how much control you have over the terrain. And I think the Corlock doesn't like lose that. I think the terrain still serves the purpose in game of what it should. And if the terrain is fucked, you have the power to manipulate the terrain to your will, even in any form.
Yeah,
you don't even have to be driller for that. You can still make like bunkers and cover and like ways, like easy ways to the heart, for example, and anything like that. Staircases up to where you need to go, for example. It's all still within your control. The Corlock doesn't eliminate those things about the terrain that make it a good part of the gameplay.
It kind of does though, right? Like if you think about it, often cases it does prevent you doing a lot of things, right? Like anytime you try and peek over the surface, you get gunned down by like 3 or 4 spouts, or like anytime you're like building a like fortified path as an engineer or something, he will still probably have like an overseer 1 or something. Like very often you are very limited, even with like tunneling or like I don't know, building walls and stuff. Like it is just overwhelming often, or just kind of encompassing, I guess might be the better word. Like it's often everywhere, holding all the angles. I don't know. I think B is good for it.
Yeah, it's almost a little bit boring because I think that's a more boring rating than what the Corlock is. But
plus the healing things, right?
Yeah, I know.
They kind of fucking suck.
They suck a little bit.
They suck a fair bit.
A fair bit, especially depending where they're placed.
Heal, like an entire segment if one's in like a nice cheesy spot. Like that kind of sucks. And it also disincentivizes backing off, right? Because if you got it like kind of low, like but you need to back off, but it's just planted its fucking pink sap things. You got to kind of go back in and deal with them, or you'll lose like a fair amount of your progress.
If you could like block, if you could block the, I think the healing, I think this could actually make it far more interesting. If it was based on line of sight, then it could become far more interesting. If you could block the beam, for example, obviously platforms would be the easiest way, but like even with yourself, even I don't know. I feel like there could be some things done there to actually make that pretty interesting. I think what would really improve the Corlock's status in the game would be if it was more definitively optional than it is, I guess. It can affect the mission too much, but then again, it's one of my favorite things, and it is one of the best things about Deep Rock, whether people like it or not, is how dynamic a mission can be and how affected it can be by things. But that's obviously a very difficult balancing act in that it can easily become unsatisfying when one of those things is just an instant team wipe. So the things still need to be balanced,
A cool, good, fulfilling mission would often have a Corlock in it, I think. Like a mission that was like, holy shit, that was sick. Look how much stuff we did. Our Corlock is normally on that, right?
Yeah, definitely. But I think it might actually just come down to the fact that it might just be a little bit too strong. Just a tad.
Yeah.
Like actually, though. And it might be as simple as that. And that's fine, I mean, it's not fine. But I mean, that's like I think that might be what it is, though. I don't think the issue is more complicated than that.
I think it's just it's the most unforgiving thing, right? Like it really, within the parameters of it being stationary, it gives no quarters otherwise, right? Like if you are in its line of sight, you will be constantly bombarded with like these really damaging things, just constantly, endlessly.
And yeah, obviously,
tons of times.
It also, goes back to sleep if you walk away from it, but that doesn't eliminate the fact that it can, it can position itself to be non-optional,
right?
you know.
Yeah.
So I feel like it should. If it's going to sleep, it should go to sleep. I don't know. I don't know what that means, but yeah, maybe it has something to do with that as well. But maybe we spent too long on something that probably not going to shift from B. I wish it could be somewhere more, tantalizing, but it would probably be inappropriate.
And Tom, are you here or? I thought so. All right.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Things happening. Right.
B for Corlock.
Stuff. Bike gear. So.
B for Corlock. Yay or nay? All right.
I thought you just went. I think it's.
Betsy.
Betsy
is an interesting boss. It's probably one of the hardest, not one of the hardest things to call it, but I don't know. I think of everything, this is the one that can go down like a sack of shit.
Yes.
For one key reason.
Right?
Yeah. It doesn't have invulnerability frames. At no point in time is it immune to damage, which I think is the key big thing. That's like everything else is.
We're probably going to have to mention the shield though, when we get a comment. That's not what that is. That's not an invulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're in there. But I don't know. It's Betsy.
So here's why I like Betsy for the exact reason. The first thing you mentioned, basically, I almost see Betsy as like an equal, right? Betsy can put you down pretty much just as quick as you can put her down, and I think that's actually kind of sick, right? I think there is an argument to be made about how oppressive her attacks can be sometimes, but at the same time, I would say 90% of the time you can just destroy her if you're aggressive enough, or if you can get enough shots off before she actually starts attacking you. That's the big one. If you can actually get the jump on her and do something that's going to do a lot of damage quickly while she's stationary, things like that will really change the flow of the fight. But as soon as you're on the back foot though, you're probably fucked though as well. You need to be taking control of the fight with Betsy.
There is no getting away from Betsy. There is no retreating. There is no giving up. There is no moving on. There is no ignoring. Once Betsy has awoke, which is very likely to occur, even though it is technically optional.
I think it's much better than the Corlock though. It's better because she takes much less space. And it's much more identifiable from a distance as well. You can prepare yourself to be cautious. Obviously, you might want to get rid of the noise.
Once that occurs, and this is especially bad in like a game with a bunch of randoms, once Betsy awakes, that's it. If everyone isn't putting the full like pedal to the metal, Betsy will probably kill everyone one by one, right? And it like overpoweringly, like probably primarily with the minigun, right? Because that is by far its strongest attack, right? Like those bombs don't really do that much, really. And they're not that dangerous, not that hard to dodge.
They're not hard to dodge, but they do a fuckload of damage.
I guess, but not often because you don't get hit by often. But if you're not behind cover, that minigun is tearing you apart. It's a simple fact of the matter. And yeah, so I don't know. It's again. Like,
there's also the fact that the boss is actually not Betsy herself. Technically, you can't do any damage by hitting Betsy, which is why I kind of like this thing. Is that the only way of the only place you can damage it is a weak point as well. It's very satisfying to shoot, and when you destroy them as well, it feels pretty great. And then of course you do get the reward, reward of Betsy as a friend.
For Betsy's sake, we probably shouldn't start bringing up rewards.
I'm just saying it's like the encapsulation of the meme of when you unlock the boss as a playable character, really, isn't it?
Yeah. She does nothing and is useless. But I don't think she even belongs in B. I don't like Betsy. It's one of the few things I do want to avoid. Generally, often don't end up avoiding it, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, it looks like we're gonna have a problem then because I'm a certified Betsy lover. So,
what were you thinking?
I love Betsy.
What the fuck was that?
No, you
don't. No, you don't.
So, Harry, what would you put Betsy in?
Oh God. I think at one point I was actually going to try and argue for A, but I mean, I don't know if I actually think she belongs with it up there with those two idiots. I don't know. I don't really understand because I don't think anything you said. So that feels to me what you said is more of a just an opinion than what you actually think
Harry,
about Betsy.
And that's what you just described an opinion. What are you saying? I think Betsy is a relentless bitch that does way too much damage when it feels like it, and is not worth doing. That's kind of my main takeaways. She didn't do anything particularly special otherwise, right? It's not like there's anything unique inherently about her. Sure, she doesn't have invincibility frames, but I mean, that's kind of it. And I think that's not like the point of the fight. It feels like it was more just a thing they didn't realize they accidentally did. Plus, when she was added, I don't think the Dreadnought had invincibility frames either, so it doesn't really work. Like, it's just kind of, I think she's dated, which I guess works, right, with the way that Betsy is. But I don't know. I don't think Betsy is anywhere close to all that. As in, I think it's quite bad. As much as I didn't want to bring rewards into it, I think for Betsy it's the key component.
That seems a little bit unfair to use to bring her down. Although it might not be, given that I guess everything else at least has like a baseline, I guess, of reward that Betsy goes below. Maybe
the Dreadnought 3 is like required, so that's kind of like null and void. The Omen is the most rewards you can probably get, right? It's overclocks, it's cosmetics, it's the king, right? The Corlock is, it boosts, it gives you currency and XP, right? Which, that gets you everything else. Betsy is a temporary bad sidekick.
If you could choose to, I guess, scrap Betsy instead. Or like, if there was some kind of rework done where you could kill Betsy by, destroying Betsy itself, and then you would scrap the parts, and you could still do that after removing the suckers as well. You could just blow her up, and then just put like her battery in the mule, and that's it. Or you just put the turret on the mule or something. And the mule has the turret, which doesn't make any sense, but right, okay. Okay, so not A.
Actually, that'd be a good idea because then you get like the option, basically, wouldn't you, to be like, do you want more rewards or do you want it to be easier when you kill her?
I mean, we know that everyone's going to choose to just scrap her, though. That's the thing.
Not everyone will, though, because people who are really fucking shit will want to actually help.
Yeah, and then they'll realise that even them, they're still dying because he didn't do anything.
Well, that's a different story. That's a different story because we've already evaluated that Betsy needs a rework to actually be more useful. But under the guise that she has been reworked to be more useful, that would be a good idea.
I guess, but that wouldn't affect the rankings on the tier list, I don't think, and it's why I think Betsy is she's a mid-ass boss fight that is then not worth it. Like, she is a big risk that is just not worth it. That fun either, more often than not. Like, she's just a neutral that can fuck you in the ass royally, but no real benefits.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I guess the thing I'm not on board with is it being a mid fight. I don't know. I think it's something so cool about the fact that you can just like you can just obliterate Betsy sometimes, and she can do the same to you. It's like a fucking it's either, well, I suppose it's either a slow death or a quick execution of her, or you will be slowly killed and hunted down. And I think both of those options are kind of cool, to be honest. Obviously, one of them is you getting killed, but still,
Alright, I guess
we're gonna have to average out to B, and I think that's fine. And I think because of her position in the game, I don't think it's as much of a problem either as the Hive Guard. The Hive Guard is one that needs to be better, more so than probably any other, actually. This idiot is important. Betsy's not important, which sounds like an insult, and it is. It is.
That's also how she's got being shit.
A little bit, even if I don't agree with that statement. Sure. Someone who really can't get away with being shit, though, and isn't shit, but is not absolved of wrongdoing, is pardon me. Yeah.
The caretaker. Waiting for me to say it?
No.
The caretaker.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to say it. The caretaker, the tearcaker, the baby maker, no, the baby shaker, the powder maker, big fucking upside down pyramid that's here to ruin your day. It's the entire, I guess, point of a mission type. There's no other version of the caretaker. It is the finale of the industrial sabotage mission every time, and that is why it is very important for it to be a dynamic and interesting boss fight, which it isn't not. The caretaker is not the worst thing about industrial sabotage. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
That's not much of a compliment, though.
Not necessarily.
Not really.
Not on its own.
The caretaker actually comes scarily close to the flaws of the Hive Guard, right? As in, it's quite similar, in that, you know, you have to kind of do the same thing over and over again, but it's a lot less of the same thing over and over again, because I think they realized how bad the Hive Guard was, where, you know, you have to destroy the vents, then shoot the eye, destroy the vents, shoot the eye, destroy the vents, shoot the eye. But ultimately, there's only, you know, 2 stages to that, and plus, the caretaker is obviously, yeah, like the caretaker is obviously a lot more than that, right? Like, the caretaker is the tendrils, the teleporting mines, the snipers, the shredders, the patrol bots. The caretaker fight is all of those things as well, right? Which is to be considered. Always primarily, and the shields as well, I guess, like the wave things. Like, I think with all of them put together, the caretaker is a pretty fucking good fight.
Right. Yeah, it's got a lot going on, and it's basically got a lot going for it. I never actually, even though it can sometimes put you in positions where you are kind of just on the back foot, I never actually feel like it's doing too much at once, and it very easily could have done, because it's got so many attacks, and it often can be doing up to 3 different attacks at once, especially if you include the tendrils as an attack and what they're doing, in that you can sometimes have a tendril that's, you know, aiming to stab you and one that's shooting you, and that can be happening at the same time as, like, the barriers are, like, moving towards you, for example, and there might be some minions that it spawned that are also hanging about, and obviously it can spawn, you know, every type of robot enemy except the other turret types. So, like, you can spawn patrol bot, shredders, and sniper turrets. It's pretty much got everything, and it's got loads of other attacks as well. Obviously, it's even got the electric thing if you go too close to it, which you don't need to do though. So that one's fine. I think that one very rarely is a problem. And of course, like things like phase bombs. Shut up. Phase bombs. I actually can't always remember when it does certain attacks, if there's anything specific about it, but it's just, goddamn. I mean, it does a really good job as well of being a massive, high stakes, you know, like dramatic boss fight. And if we want to consider it on those terms, it doesn't fall short of what it's meant to be. It does mean it's a very overwhelming thing to have to do, like, more than once in a session. Arguably, more than once within like recent memory is almost too much. That's the thing. And that's not more so Industrial Sabotage's fault than anything else. The Caretaker is the good part of Industrial Sabotage, but it's also the thing that makes it so, big as well. It's such a huge element, both literally and like spiritually, in terms of how much of the mission is focused on it. In terms of it's so overbearing, and that does make it difficult to place because the fight itself is so clearly a cut above everything else, and it is well designed to be a cut above everything else. But that fact also makes it harder to do as much. It makes it less replayable as well. Whereas Elimination I find to be a fairly replayable mission type. I have no problem doing up to, well, at least a couple in a given session would not be a problem for me. 2 eliminations within like 3 hours of playing is not like a horrible idea, for example. But more than yeah, that's the thing. So I don't know where I would place it. I think it could end up in, I would say, what do you think? Is it a question of 2 different tiers? Are we thinking about
is trying to cut it out of, like, should we cut it out of Industrial Sabotage as a whole, right? Like, if we look at the merits of it itself, it has a lot of positives that they've like succumbed to elsewhere, right? I think it improves upon the Hive Guard and the up and coming Omeran in ways that shows that they've learned from their mistakes, right? With like technically each fight being fairly different from each other. Not that it often feels it, like the impact is not that great, but they do. Like between the breaking of the segments, it does a multitude of different things.
Yeah,
right.
It's also just biome and terrain, which does not go unnoticed, especially in a smaller one. Like, I actually think the differences between the 2 versions of Industrial Sabotage is more. People don't realize it as much as they should. Like, in a bigger one, that room is very, very big. In the smaller one, it's extremely claustrophobic. And that actually puts a really big spin on the fight. And obviously, biomes can have a pretty big effect. I think crystalline caverns is one that I think of a lot because of when you get like the big crystal formations, that has a pretty major effect on the fight. And like, you could leave them; they could be useful as cover if you want, and they could let you get up to the top of the Caretaker and closer to the vents and things like that. But they also might just serve to get in your way at the same time. And it's like there's a lot of decision making there. And the Caretaker, in how it's positioned in the mission type, and this is why we can't separate it from Industrial Sabotage, because the way it's positioned in the mission type gives you so much, gives you an infinite amount of time to prepare and think about how you're going to approach it based on the environment. And also, because of the way the mission's constructed, you always have shit tons of nitra as well. So ammo is not a problem. And it's also, in my opinion, it doesn't even take too long. Like, I think, it's rare that you'd use up a whole. It's rare that you use up more than 2 resupplies for yourself, I'd say, in a Caretaker fight, and I think that's actually pretty reasonable. I don't know. I think it's mostly good, actually. The more I think about it,
I really do.
I almost want to flame it because I don't like Industrial Sabotage that much. But the more I think about the Caretaker, I think I do like the Caretaker, actually.
Yeah, which is why I think, if that was like the only thing you had to do in that objective, I think people would have a different opinion.
I think your idea is so fucking good.
It does get old, but the good thing about, or the way they've mitigated it getting old, is that it's quite a rare mission type that you don't get very often.
Yeah.
So
that's how
I think if you played it on repeat, though, it would suck. But you don't.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
And you aren't meant to. You aren't. I don't think they thought they truly changed it when they did anyway. You could still argue that its position in the game was better in, season 1 and 2, but I don't think it's changed that much, apart from being in assignments. But I'm not completely repelled. It's just the difference between industrial sabotage and like any other mission. Really, though, is I know that the industrial sabotage is going to be at least 40 minutes. That's the difference as well, and that has an effect on the caretaker fight because it is a taxing fight, and you always have a lead up to it as well. Instead of your really cool idea, you might have the ability to start it straight away, which is Tyler's idea. And I love that.
Had like 15 to 20 minutes in that mission, right? That is like any other normal mission, like other than the more like complicated stuff. That is like.
Whereas like in elimination, there's like a more than 50. I would say the chances are in most eliminations you'll probably have done one of the dreadnoughts before 15 minutes. Like a maximum length elimination can still get done in like about half an hour. Like even with 3 dreadnoughts, you could potentially do it in about half an hour, which is pretty quick.
You get about half an hour in and you've just started that fight.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's and it's a lot. That's the thing. It is such an amount.
It's still even in that situation where you spend a lot of time there, it's still probably the best part of the mission, even by that point. Yeah. So I'm thinking A though for this fella. Actually,
I was thinking on its own merits as a boss fight within itself entirely. The caretaker is probably is their most recent attempt at a boss fight, I would say.
Well, it's not though, is it? Look who's next.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that's a boss fight. I would just say that's a boss. if you kind of get what I mean.
There is a difference. There is definitely. And it's also, I don't think it should be entirely separated. The fact that the caretaker is one of those things, that's just fucking cool. Like, it's just a fucking awesome thing. Like, when you first see it as well, especially when you first see it, I'm thinking, like, back to when it first got introduced. Like, when you first start on industrial sabotage, you just see it just hovering there behind this shield. And then you come back to it at the end, and it wakes up. It feels like it was sleeping, and now it's woken up. And that sort of impact is felt. And then the death animation, it doesn't actually get old. It's amazing. It's fucking ridiculous. And not just the death animation. I mean, the fact that it basically switches off, so it literally falls over, like dramatically explodes, and then the way the vault opens as well. The way that opens is also just God. That part of the mission type works pretty much every time. Actually, killing the caretaker feels great, and I don't think that should be undervalued. And that's part of just being cool. And it's just a great design as well. So yeah, good old caretaker. And I think I think it's respectably up there with those other two as well. But this is also confirmed to me because I also wouldn't put those two above caretaker either. So this is becoming more and more clear that there probably isn't an S tier, which is really bizarre. Unless we want to put the prospector in there just for fun.
Dear God, no. Yeah.
So well done, caretaker. I guess.
No industrial sabotage though. But
no
caretaker. Yeah. All right. Harold.
Yes, Harold.
Or the what is it? Corruptor.
Yeah, it's Corruptor. Oh, he's too tall.
He's too tall.
He's too tall.
I have barely fought him. To be honest with you, I've almost beat the pass. I'm at like 92, and I've still probably only fought him like 7 to 8 times.
It was 12, Tyler.
Was it?
Yeah.
Door.
What?
Who could possibly be at the door?
What the fuck? We don't know, believe it or not. We don't know. And neither does anyone watching.
It's the postman. It's the postman.
Comment below who's at the door. Fucking hell. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Harold, Harold is the Rockpox boss, right? And I think that immediately works in its favour, actually, because Harold is quite a specific fight. But the reason why it works so well as a Rockbox boss is because it does utilize the thing that you use against the Rockbox. Okay, the cleaning tools, they're involved, and that is a definitively good thing. Genuinely. When we first saw that, we were immediately like, yes, that is a good thing, and that hasn't changed. I still think that is a very good aspect of Harold, and I don't inherently need Harold to be, and we are going to keep calling him Harold, even though I hate it, kind of. I don't inherently need Harold to be a proper fight in the sense of, you have to use your weapons. I think this aspect of him is actually perfectly fine. And I'm actually happy that they did it. It gives those tools some more presence in the game, and I think they actually put a lot of time into making them. So it's completely fair enough. But Harold's just a bit weird, though. That's the thing. He's a weirdo. He scuttles away. He is a problem. He's like currently like still the main seasonal event, so you're really encouraged to do it, especially if you haven't completed the pass yet. You really should do it because he is a problem, even if you don't attack him. He does corrupt the world. You probably shouldn't leave him alone. But I don't know. Is Harold fun? I guess is a good question because he also doesn't stop swarms. It's something else that he doesn't do, which is kind of not great. He can't really, take advantage of Rockbox enemies much in the way that the Prospector can take advantage of rival enemies because it can only really spawn larvae because everything else would have to be infected. But he's also solid enough on his own. I don't know. I don't know where to go with Harold actually, because he's very different, and like the fact that your weapons don't matter, for example, is even though I like the tools being evolved, I think your weapons not mattering isn't necessarily a good thing either.
Yeah, and the weapons are a bit of a double edged sword. Like it is good and cool and wise, I would go with, that they are used in that boss fight, but it comes with the consequences of those tools are only really useful against stationary objectives because you have to lug them around. Well, this thing is moving, right, which means that they're a bit of a problem. They can get in the way, as it were. But I don't know. I think he's pretty mid. Generally, I think that's fair, right?
I'm starting to see something that's going on, Tyler, with this tier list, and I can undo this. I can undo this immediately if you disagree. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna hide it from you for a moment.
You're just gonna pull the thing down, aren't you?
No. Obviously, everyone can see what I'm doing. This is what I was doing.
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay, good.
I don't think they've made an S tier boss fight.
Does that mean if it needs to come? Does that mean if it needs to go down then instead?
I think everything should go down one because
that's also fine.
I don't think they have done the best that they can do yet. Still, all the S tiers that we've already done, I think I've been 100% sure that they fucking nailed it. Even if it's only in the moment, I'm like, they nailed this, right? I don't know what examples are, but the guns, for example,
the grunt,
right?
The grunt's always going to be an S tier enemy.
Yeah, those things that I can 100% confidently say this is a masterful decision, and this is why they are the king developers.
I just realised all this actually was moving let's see Harold and the Hive Guard down.
Good. But I don't think they made a boss fight, which I can wholeheartedly say is a masterful, unique, good thing. I think those 3 and A have their own things. Like, I think the twins are a very good example of a twin boss fight. The Omeran is a very like peak, right? Like of like difficulty in that. And I think the Caretaker is like the build up of certain types of bosses they've been doing and seem to like doing. For example, with the Hive Guard and Omeran. But I think those types of bosses still aren't the best ever. Plus, it's in that game mode. I still don't think they've done the best boss they could ever possibly do. And I want to leave the space open for that boss, essentially.
That's right. The Omeran Dreadnought. The Omeran Golem. I don't know.
The twin Omeran Caretaker.
Holy shit.
It's like you get the Caretaker, then you get 2 Omerans sticking out of it like arms, and then you put the twins at the end of those arms. And it's like it's just the Nemesis, actually. That's
just
what the Nemesis looks like.
Medusa. It's just
Medusa.
Shut up.
Don't talk about the Medusa.
So does that mean we just I mean, I don't want to talk about Harold.
Yeah, I think Harold is a very mediocre addition, which is apt for season 4.
Yeah, Harold is more so just a by the way, I think Harold is a good addition, though. That's cool. I do want to clear that up. And I think he serves at least to bolster the presence and just to bolster the presence of the cleaning tools as well. That sort of thing. I think Harold is a perfectly fine addition to the game. He's definitely not a bad one. And that's kind of what Betsy and Harold are. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with them, and I think they're actually fine in the state that they are. The Hive Guard is the one who's more deserving of change. Speaking of deserving of change. Yeah. Okay, so this is obviously this is one of the flying rocks, but this is actually the best thing because I looked up Hearthstone. You can get a PNG of the Hearthstone, but not like the whole thing, the shell. So I think this rock is the best thing we're gonna get. So yeah, the Omeran Hearthstone.
Just get it down in F. Rip that band-aid off.
Sorry. No. What? That was never where this was going to go.
Sorry.
No.
Yes,
no. This is exactly the same as. This is not exactly the same. This is pretty much the same as Industrial Sabotage. I don't think the Omeran's the bad thing about escort duty. I think the Omeran is the reason why I don't mind like escort duty almost. I think I hate having to like come back to Doretta to like repair and things like that. But actually like having to balance out the like attacks and repairing is actually like works in the Omeran fight. I think all the aspects of it that are bad usually are fine when it comes down to this part of it. And it also actually makes pretty good use of all the different classes' strengths as well. I don't know what you're smoking. The Omeran itself is not like a disaster.
Which boss fight are we like? Is the one boss fight we know that Ghost Ship wants to like go back to and improve? Can you tell me what boss fight that is, Harry?
Yeah, it's the Omeran Hearthstone.
Yeah, so I think get off your fucking high horse, you shit cunt. Alright, maybe not the bottom one, but bring it down one. At the very least.
Okay, that's fine.
Because I think, first of all, calling it a boss fight is being a bit lenient.
A little bit, yeah.
Like, yeah. It's like an object which never technically specifically attacks you or moves, or I don't know, it's like barely sentient. It probably is, but it's a stretch. But it is a boss fight. And it does have...
I think both of these are stretches, like the next one as well. To be honest.
Yeah. But I think technically, yeah, it is a boss fight. And it has like 2 interesting parts, that mainly being one of them, the fact that it's not technically attacking like you or like attacking, but the other one being you have to protect Doretta, which is an interesting thing that none of the other boss fights have, right? Those boss fights are either kill or be killed. This is either protect Doretta or be killed.
Well, it's kind of like the difference, and the 2 sides of escort duty. I guess it's like I kind of hate escorting Doretta. I don't necessarily hate protecting her though. perfectly honest, because when she just gets to stay still and you also know what you're in for, like things like, even though I don't do it, things like building a bridge over her with platforms to protect her from the rocks, for example, is something. And I think it's those things, by the way, especially the beamers, which take, that takes advantage of a lot of, like, literally every class has a way of dealing with those, pretty much. And it's like, I don't know, I like that part of it especially. I think when the Omeran isn't a shit show, it's kind of alright.
It's kind of mid. Like, the fact is, face a normal swarm.
Yeah, that part. That's not
are kind of bullshit, but you can deal with them if you prepare. Normal swarm spires that are phenomenally easy to deal with ultimately, right? You just said everyone can deal with them, and that is not a full statement by any stretch of the imagination, right? They are very easy to deal with and barely do anything, to the point where you can leave them and it wouldn't be that big of a deal, really, as long as you deal with all the glyphids. But like, it is, and that's it. That's the boss fight. You fight the things you fight in literally every other part of the game. Like always, you're fighting glyphids, normal swarm of them, right? Then you get the rocks, then a normal swarm again, and then you get those beams that barely do anything. Like, that's the boss fight. Half of it is just the normal game, what happens when there's a swarm. The other half is extraordinarily predictable, easy to deal with things. And that's it. It's like, wow, hooray! The big climax of this drain of my fucking life mission. Like,
you know what?
We did a whole discussion video, didn't we, about the escort duty?
Did we?
Yeah, I remember talking about it before, and we came up with a bunch of ideas to improve it.
I think we did that on stream once.
Yeah.
And we intended to make like a more proper video, but I probably lost my PowerPoint license.
Got a license for that PowerPoint. I think, Tyler, I've realised why I don't mind it. It's because most of my experience with the Hearthstone is solo engineer. And it's really good for that. Yeah. It's really good. It actually is. But that doesn't mean the Hearthstone is good. I know the difference.
You probably don't even have to move to do that, right? Like, you probably do not have to move to win that boss fight.
If you have the grenade launcher or you have Class-Creek Catalyst, then you definitely don't have to move. Like, if you have a way of destroying the beamers without, and even then you can get Bosco to do it. You can make Bosco mine the beamers. So yeah, maybe that has a lot to do with it.
I think
so honestly,
like,
Tyler, honestly, I could if you want to do it sort of like almost on a, I know you don't like it, but almost more of an on principle thing, I could put it in B.
Yeah, because I think the Omeran has more things that need improving about it than even the Hive Guard, right? I think it is a
more exactly. In fact, 3G has said that the Omeran, it's more important that the Omeran gets changed,
and I think
or
they
tweaked.
know it because they've specifically said that they know they can improve the Omeran, but they just haven't got round to it, right? I don't think they mentioned anything about the Hive Guard, which is why I think we kind of got to put up with it. But yeah, I don't know, man. It fucking blows. It's like it's a sucky end to a sucky mission.
Omeran heart blow. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, think about it as well. I mean, I guess it has a lot to do with why I'm just not so harsh on escort GT as perhaps I should be sometimes. It's just most of my experience is as a solo engineer. And it's like, it is actually a really good mission type for that experience. Not because I actually like escort duty, but because it plays into what engineer does quite well, especially when it's just an engineer on its own. It feels pretty good. So, that might explain a lot of it. I don't actually have a problem with putting the Hearthstone in D at all. And I think it's actually very reasonable, especially given what we just said about what they said about it. So that's perfectly fine. In fact, I would say this looks pretty good. Time to spoil it with wherever the fuck we're going to put the prospector.
I haven't seen the prospector in the better part of 2 years. First of all, like, I have not seen this guy. Jesus Christ,
That makes sense, right?
Doing it the whole time, really. But yeah.
Aspect reminds me of when there were theories that the rivals were like mimicking Hoxie's wildlife, and this is a silicate harvester, which it is.
Yeah, the good old days. It's just don't be doing. Oh, what are you up to? It's painfully mid. Like, what the fuck is there to talk about this guy?
It's painfully prospector.
Yeah, he's just a source of getting rivals in a normal mission. That's it. That's what he is.
But he is exclusively a summoner, as well.
Yeah,
it doesn't attack you. In fact, it flees. And obviously, I think the aspect of
goes back like previous caves, which fucking blows. Like,
but I think the aspect of destroying these parts and slowing it down is kind of neat.
Yeah. Congrats. Like, I'm not fighting D. I'm just saying that, like, I don't think it belongs anywhere higher than C. Like, it's about as mid as those two, for sure, right?
Hold on.
Like, who the fuck gives a shit about the prospector? Literally no one. Not a singular person.
Well, not there anymore.
Where is it gone?
I deleted it.
Why?
Oh, so you don't think I should?
No, because it still counts. It just sucks.
Okay. Yeah, all right. I don't think deeds make sense though. Yeah, the problem I have with it though is that I do think it's actually making this tier list look worse. That's the problem I have with it. Like, I think this looks pretty correct. Like, this makes sense to me. Add this guy in.
Right. I think I'm willing to leave it out with the specific elaboration of right now being that leaving it out is a point of how pointless it is. That it doesn't deserve to be in the tier list about boss fights.
Yeah. I am reaping what I sowed. I put him there, right? Although you did agree.
It falls under the qualifications.
It does. It does. But I also don't feel like putting. I just don't want to put it in the tier list. I just don't want to. So fuck it.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is our enemies.
Enemies.
Not enemies. Big boss, big enemies, meaning enemies, big evil bosses.
I mean, I think I would call an elite grabber a meanie enemy.
It's starring like fauna, flora, and mechanoids.
Yeah, and I feel like the Heartstone and the Corrupt are both in separate categories as well. Especially the Heartstone.
Yeah. I mean, the Heartstone is just a stone. The Corruptor, Lord knows what that thing is.
I mean, I don't consider it an animal type. That's what I'm saying. And I don't think they're plants either. I guess like Parasite.
Betsy was a mix of the two.
Yeah, I guess Betsy's a mix of Parasite and Automaton.
But yeah, ultimately, I boss fights aren't Ghost Ship's biggest strength. Not that they're inherently bad at it, but it's not what people are flocking to their games for, which is I think something they kind of learned.
Yeah.
There's Industrial Sabotage. They relied on the boss fight, and even though it's a good one, as you could see, at least what we think it is, it's not what people wanted. People don't want giant, big boss fights. I mean, people claim they do, right? People constantly ask for the mother and stuff like that. And hell, we do. We just designed a Macterra boss fight. But I think, the boss fight we asked for is probably what they are best at. No, not best at, but like to do the most. It's just like the Gorlock ones or the Omrin ones. Or even the Dreadnoughts. They're all basically the same kind of tier of boss fight. They have like a gimmick and a couple good attacks, really. That's all they really need. And I think that's my takeaway, at least.
What's your takeaway, Harry?
On toast.
Ugh.
My takeaway is what you said when you started talking, which was what I said right at the start, which is that, you know, boss fights they're not Deep Rock specialty. They're not what the game is necessarily. But I do think there are some really good examples of them, and I think what they've at least proven is that they have a place in Deep Rock. There wouldn't be this many if they didn't, and that means I think there should be an S tier one day. I don't think they should stop. I'm not inherently jonesing for a boss fight in season 5, but if there is one, we know it's not going to be part of a mission type. But either way, I want to see more, but I also want to make sure they're very carefully chosen. I want the next boss fight to be chosen in the way that it seems they've chosen the next mission type, if that is in season 5, which is one that isn't like escort duty and Industrial Sabotage, which is exactly, like, literally word for word what the next boss fight should be. Not like escort duty and Industrial Sabotage. It's the same thing, but the two should obviously be separate. You can't put those together and get the result. The mission type needs to be without boss fight. The boss fight needs to be without mission type. And so yeah, that's my takeaway and take on bosses in Deep Rock, and this will go unchanged for a very long time. In fact, I can't actually see this one of the tier list. I can't is doing again. Like a redux. I think if they add more boss fights, it could just be a case of where does it go? Is this the S tier boss fight? Something like that. I don't know.
I think
we definitely wouldn't. I'm saying we're probably never going to redo it. Okay. Things might get added to it, and that's the benefit of having this this PowerPoint. It's just like a collection, basically, which will, you know, eventually it'll probably get filled out with everything else. I'm not gonna, you know, remake the ones we've already done. I'd rather just wait for possible reiterations, even if that's gonna take a while. But anyway, yeah, I think that is us. I think that's it, and I think we need to go.
Thank you all for watching.
Although I suppose, I mean, really, I'm supposed to do the outro, aren't I?
All right.
Yes.
Do it.
All right.
Do the intro.
If you enjoyed this, what?
Harry, do the intro.
Welcome to another episode of the Barrel Vision Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the Barrel Vision Podcast, the Barrel Vision Podcast, the Barrel Vision Podcast, cast.
Okay.
Yeah, that can't be it. If you whatever, like, subscribe, bye.